Okay.
Yeah, sure. So, good morning, everyone. A very warm welcome. It's spring, and Preetha is here with her proposition. Preetha is our newly minted head of department at the School of Planning and Development. And prior to that, she's had many other roles at Sushant University. She was a visiting faculty earlier, and then joined us in 2017 as a full-time faculty. And she's had extensive research and professional experience, teaching experience in India and the United Kingdom. And research interests include housing, planning, settlement studies, and affordability. She's also doing her PhD here at Sushant University, which focuses on affordable housing. Her topic today, which she'll be sharing with us, is livability in urban India, the design versus the experience of the users. So, with that, over to you, Preetha.
Yeah, thank you. Thanks, Radha, for this wonderful introduction. And yeah, let me start by sharing my screen now. Uh, is my screen visible? And am I audible?
Yes,
Yeah.
both. Yes to both.
Thank you. So, like Radha said, this is topic is actually a part of my research that I'm doing on affordable housing. So, when we talk about affordable housing, we all know, like affordability in affordable housing is a big issue in India. We are not able to, not only in India but world over, we are not able to address this affordability issue. If we make it affordable, then it is not adequate. If it is adequate, and then it is not affordable. So there is a lot of initiatives or a lot of research or a lot of programs and schemes, and from everywhere is people are working on this to make housing affordable for all. So countries have tried various methods to do that. But we will also see there is a paradoxical situation where one end of the spectrum we say there is a huge housing shortage, and then the other end there are like a lot of housing which is lying vacant. Now, so it's like approximately 11% of the housing in Delhi itself is lying vacant. So this reflects that the supply market has not taken into consideration the people's willingness to pay or ability to pay. And so my whole thesis or my research is based on this hypothesis that willingness and ability to pay is based on the consumer's beneficiaries' perceived value of the property, which leads to the livability. So livability is very important component that score very high on affordability. After like a lot of research, and I've taken up two case studies, which is like one of the most livable cities in India, Trivandrum, and two models or two housing model. One is a resettlement project, and one is a redevelopment project, and where which is like one of the best models of providing a livable and an affordable housing solutions to see and measure what is the status. Like we design with certain understanding, and what is existing now, what is the scenario now. So just this is a research paper for a journal publication, and where I'm just trying to compare between the what was the philosophy between behind the designing of this settlements, and what is the user experience, and what is their level of livability to calculate. So this led me to calculate, quantify. So livability is again a very subjective uh, topic, because and it has got a different definition similar to affordability. And so here I just try to bring in, like how do we integrate livability into the affordability models. And this paper is basically trying to understand and how I've analyzed my data, and how I have tried to bring out, like the design, or the designers or the architects or the planners idea behind designing this community and the user's experience, or how settled they are, what is their livability index at present. So this is one of the community. This is so this will come back at the end once my presentation is over. This is a Karimadam colony. This is designed by the conceptualized, or the initial design was done by Laurie Baker sir, and executed and implemented by Cosworth. And this is also Cosworth's project. And the previous one was started the work on this project in 2007. Three phases are over here, and the fourth phase is still going on. This came up in 2017, and people inhabited started living here from 2018. So I'll be just doing not a comparative study. I'm just trying to figure out what is actually the livability in these two communities. This is totally Karimadam colony is a redevelopment project. Earlier it used to be a slum, and now it has been uh, open. That dense fabric has removed, and it has been a terrace apartment uh, concept. This has been made, and these are the existing picture. And Karimadam colony is actually at the center of the city. You can see railway station, Chale Market, which is a 300-old market, and Padmanabha Swami temple. This I think everyone is familiar with. Whoever visit Kerala or to Trivandrum, make sure they visit the temple. So very tourist um attraction, and not only spiritual but tourist attraction space. And so the people in this Karimadam colony get a lot of employment opportunity in this area, and they're well connected with all the services and all the infrastructure. Similarly, Kaladimukam colony, this is actually on the outskirts of Trivandrum city, and it's a resettlement colony. That is like people around this area where like, and the beneficiary was the poorest of the poor people, identified by the local government agencies, and then they were brought into this area, and they are living here. So this is the locational map of it. This is the whole colony. There is a river here and full green space and everything, but um, density is far. So settlements are less. So for them, it is a big challenge to commute from one place to other. So we see in various resettlement and redevelopment projects, one observes that planning and designing are based on the standards and professional understanding of livability. So most of the time, it does not match with users' perception of livability. So this is the hypothesis on which my this research is on this paper is based on. Uh, yeah, so, and to make such an assumption, I have been like, even the uh, literatures talk about it, and this was first um, brought to focus by Jane Jacob and the economist and educator Milton Friedman, that the general tendency while planning and designing, especially for urban slum population, is to follow a paternalistic planning approach. Kevin Lynch mapping technique, it's identified three formal components to perceive an environment: identity, structure, and meaning. However, his studies on cities were merely confined to identity and structure, excluding the meaning. Le Corbusier believed that one could not afford to leave the designing of cities to its citizens. So again, sorry, it shows like, when we are designing, when a planners on in the initial at least years, we used to be basically thinking that they know they want to build things based on the standards and what people want. This is what is going to help the community, and all these aspects will help them in their development. But there are designers like Jan Gehl who follow the principle of understanding people and their life first, then space and building in order to plan a livable space for them. So I have used the Jan Gehl's method of documenting and observing a community to come up with measure the livability, that is the qualitative data, and in quantifying the data, I have used Alkins-Foster method, which is used to measure the deprivation level of people. Here I was used the same model to measure the uh, enablement factor of a community. So we'll go into that, and I'll be trying to explain those things to you all. So it is like I said, to understand the level of difference in the perception by the professionals and the inhabitants. So now let me just briefly tell what is this livability. The concept of livability actually represent overall quality of life and well-being. It's a place-based concept where the attributes of a place help the residents in meeting their economic, social, cultural need, promoting their health and well-being along with protecting the resources and the ecosystem. And so based on various literatures, these were the 5 attributes or the indicators that was taken to study these communities, indicators of society, family, community, health, wealth, safety, environment, and sustainability. Based on these parameters, this was further subdivided into 9 attributes and 47 constructs, and a questionnaire was prepared based on these parameters. And it was done to do a detailed study of all the design planned elements for a prosperous community in an affordable housing project, and to document the people and place relation by to measure their satisfaction level and the value they associate to the place or the project, which is the qualitative study and quantitative studies. And so the study, how it was carried out, in the first phase of the research was focused on collecting all the qualitative data. And this was captured by adopting the principles of Jan Gill's method of observation, look and learn method. This helped in mapping people's experience to generate the non-numerical data for livability. In the second phase of research, the focus was to collect the quantitative data, numerical data through door-to-door questionnaire survey, on which Alkite-Foster method was applied for the statistical analysis to obtain the livability index of the community. So the usage of these 2 methods help in validating the finding and understanding the impact of new development on its people. So this is the Karibadam colony. Like in the first map, I was just explaining. So here is the colony. This is Chale Central Padmanabha. It falls in a very low-lying area. Initially, this area was habited by Brahmin community, but because of the Chale market and stations and everything, and this was a low-lying area, and there was a drainage system of the cities started was passing through it, and this pond was collecting all the sewerage from the city. These people started moving out, and it becomes a good opportunity for the migrant community or people looking for an informal jobs to come and settle here. And it soon become occupied by this informal group of people, and they started living here in this place. So this is how it became in 90s. In 2006, this slum was taken up for redevelopment with an aim to provide housing to approximately 560 households with interactive community space, amenities like healthcare, Anganwadi study center for young children. And it was converted into 4-story walk-up. So this was the phases in which it was planned to develop, and it was planned to clean up the pond and make it as a habitable place, because otherwise it doesn't, it comes in a non-tenable land where you cannot build. If we see the program and policies, this should have been resettled somewhere, but because the proposal was to clean it up and develop the whole area and make the pond friendly, but still the pond has not much of the work has been gone into reviving the pond, and still it is like, city drain pipe goes from the center of this settlement. So these issues are there, but still we will be doing the study and how much of it has impacted the people and everything. So the currently, though the plan was to develop 560 units, so far only 360 units have been built, and in three phases. So the fourth phase is, this phase is still not started, and still the squatter settlements are living there. Kaladimukkam is again part of slum eradication project of Trivandrum Corporation, which started in 2015. And they brought a land in semi-marshy land closer to the Karamana River. And again, it was planned to build 320 housing unit, which they did, and the people are living there. And so this is the kind of the project. It was also done in two phases. And so the intention of this project was to ensure better livelihood for people and to provide something more than just living places. So it took people from the around the wards, and they were removed from that places, from those wards, and planted here. Now, I'll quickly go into the qualitative data analysis. So these were the points that was taken into consideration to measure the location and accessibility, tenure security, infrastructure, how much is, what is the availability and the adequacy of the water or electricity, drainage, sewerage, safety and security, how safe it is to walk at night, how trustworthy neighbors are there, and living comfort. These were done in qualitatively, which is like asking the people, giving them through the questionnaire, and also by once you use the Alkin-Foster method, you use some certain rules where you use the standards and everything to measure it, and then it was like, validate with yes or no kind of a thing, whether it is actually suiting them or not. So yeah, zero and ones were used to do that, but for the qualitative data analysis in the initial first phase, to measure it, we were doing it like, I was doing in this household outdoor activities, which is divided into three category: necessary activity, optional activity, and the social activities. So necessary activity, even if whether you have the facility or not, you need to do it, like going to school, work, shopping for daily need, meeting friends and families. Optional activities, going out to eateries, movies, or stroll. Social activity, meeting people, and the frequency at which different activities and function take place at the common place. So that mapping was done on this, and this activity mapping was done for 2 weekends and 1 weekend over three time slot: morning at 9 when the people are going for work, school and the work; afternoon around 3 o'clock when people come back for home for lunch and relaxing, or the school kids are coming back home; evening around 6 o'clock when people are generally relaxing, going out to play or for shopping or other purposes, or coming back from work; playtime for the kids and youngster. So what were observed, like outdoor activity that was observed during this way, was how many people walk through each entrances in a span of 15 minutes, what are the age group, what is the gender, and are the people moving fast, slow, or pausing, chatting, what is the activities that is taking place. Then are they walking to a bus stop, auto stand, or walking to their destination? Things like that was observed. And so, I mean, I'm just giving uh, briefly, I'm going about it because I just want to explain my methodology or the process of analyzing the data. So this is just one example. I'm not going into detail about it. So these A, B, C are the points, those junctions that I've taken to wait it here for 10 minutes to see who are using and how they are, where are they going, what is the maximum people who use these routes and everything. And XYZ is the meeting points where people gather and what is happening here in this location. So in this map, if you see, the route is like this and there is no direct road there, people generally tend to use from this point to this. And because the city is on this side, and they are all like, don't dependent on much on the bus or the transport system. They are mainly walking, pedestrian people, and they take direct route from this Y point to B, and then from here, this route they will take. This is the shortest route to reach to either the railway station or the market or to the temple area. A&C is also active because here also a lot of service activities are there, repair shops and all. So mostly working people in this area will be using this part, and C is the bus stop. So morning time during going to the schools and everything, this place is mainly used. So yeah, so this is what happens. How many people were moving in the morning and afternoon, evening was captured in both all the three entrants, and the age group was measured. Who is using which entrance in what capacity, and male and female genders and everything was mapped. Similarly, and like a lot of such observations are mapped and documented. So I'm not going into those details. Similarly, for Kaladi Mukam, these two were the main uh, exit or the entry points. So the observation that was here, and this were the major networking places. People meet here, play in these areas. So this is one of the entrance, and this route is this path. So yeah, so and you will see this main community, the existing or the older localite street is here. They stay in this area, and the uh, uh, redevelopment project that took place is inside this area. And yeah, so here also you see people are basically using the entrances morning time less than for work related is all what they are using it. And you observe that. Basically, these recreational places are used by youngsters for to play basketball or badminton or things like that. Otherwise, the interactions places are less. Mostly, it is covered with lot of plantations and everything, which is like they can't use. They have the because it is closer to the Karamna river, so low-lying area, all is flooded, and they have the issue of snakes and everything. So they generally, and there's no street lights in the streets, and they don't use that streets and everything after a certain point of time, and basically they use the roads for like necessity activity. Yeah. So this Karimadam colony, it is necessary activities is good, and the facilities are good. Optional activities also happens at a regular basis based on the infrastructure and the usage. Social activities also, that all those places are getting well utilized by the people for their activity. Karimadam, Kaladimukam colony, which is the resettled colony. Mainly that conditions are there, but the facilities are not there. So it's all come under the poor infrastructure. So based on the above observation, it was realized that people from Karimadam colony were able to carry out all their outdoor activities quite comfortably. There were a lot of interaction among people in the public spaces. The streets, roads were always active with movement. But this is not true for Kaldimukam. The optional and the social activities were quite limited and less frequent. The public spaces were mostly used by youngsters during playtime, and the streets were used for carrying out only the necessary activities. Therefore, if we apply Jan Gill's theory of good interaction between public space and public life improves the well-being of a person, we can say quality of life at Karimadam is better than the Kalidibukam colony. Now, this again was tested through the survey and using the AF model, that is Alkan Foster method, where we took the location of the settlement and its accessibility. This was how far it is from the bus stop and the stations and everything, and what is the people's viewpoint about it. So people who were like positive were mapped, and who said about it doesn't matches accessibility park, and it is comes under zero negative, and total number of percentage of people said yes. If it is less than 50, it was given zero, and if it is more than 50, was marked as positive and given one rating. So both for Kaldimukam and the Karimadam was done for all the aspects, and yeah, and you get uh, you get the intensity score and the AF rating. And if we see that, you will see when the data was analyzed through this method, we see that Karimadam has been able to achieve a livability index of 51.8%, whereas the Kaladimukkam, it is only 37.8%. So, and that major factors that had helped in the enablement of Karimadam colony is they have this locational advantage. All the amenities are in the vicinity, transport related choices are there, employment opportunities there, multiple options in the informal sector, railway station, temple, market. In situ development, it's an old settlement who were not displaced, so there was a lot of social bonding and strong um, neighborhood groups were there. So women were the very active member, and you can see the women empowerment and participation was very high in this community. There was a sense of security and belonging. It's low density, better infrastructure, and active community participation. Housing unit design, the inbuilt facilities like attached bathroom and kitchen with storage shelf, also with regular electrical and water supply was there, and good social health, low mobility rate, and good childcare facilities. That factors that was not conducive to in Kaldimukkam were resettlement. The beneficiaries were not from the same settlement, but from surrounding, two wards. The community bonding, participation in community development or related activity was not there. Location, public transport choice were limited, and the timings of the frequency of this public transport was also limited. Sense of security and belonging was not there. So these were the factors that didn't help them, and the yeah. Yeah, so that's it. So this is how I try to measure, and so what the idea behind the whole thing is to understand and the measure from the community participation and measure their livability index at the beginning stage of itself, so that we can incorporate that in our designs and come up with a better solution for the community. Yeah, thank you.
Thank you, Preeti. Yeah, I think you had shared an earlier proposition with us. I think on a slightly different topic, maybe a couple of years ago.
Yeah, that was on community, same topic. That was on the beginning stage of my research, where I say how women empowerment and their community participation help in the development of community, in this kind of projects.
Yeah.
How important community participation and their enablement is there, and from the perspective of the women.
From women, yeah. So nice to see the development and further work on this. So, all right. So, are there any questions for Preetha? Any clarifications, questions? Yeah, Sobhya.
Hi, Preetha ma'am. Good morning.
Sobhya.
It was great to hear from you. Such a, I mean, topic which everybody are interested to learn about. I just have one question from you. Like so you're looking at urban India for that matter. So looking at the complexity of the Indian cities that we have. So we have metropolitan cities, and we do have tier one, tier two, tier three cities. So looking at the diverse nature of the cities, how do you think that the measures that you are derived from your research, from your study, they be applicable to all the cities, or do you think that there need to be some sort of I mean contextualization also required whenever a city is being talked about? Because you took up a case of Trivandrum, and both the neighborhoods were from the same city. So if we change the context, how do you think this quantification, this standardization uh, could be looked or could be referred by other researchers for that matter?
So, in my research also, this is one of my, what are the limitation of it? So it should be on the same context. And also, like when I'm talking about livability, the first definition of livability that I'm saying is it's a place-based concept. So the place and the context plays very important, and the parameters that I've taken is also very generic. We apply that, like, if the location, infrastructure, open space, housing typology, but there may be added factors into it. We are just measuring them. What is the status of it? And it is like, community based and that particular region based. So that has to be modified according to the place and everything. So my study also was first when I was making my survey questionnaire. It had a very generic. Then I did the pilot study, and then I have to modify it. So that will always come, and like I'm saying, also the limitation is this could be applied, could be other similar demography or the scale of the city, and what is the literacy level and the mobility rate and everything. So that kind of an areas may we can try to apply that, and once from there you have to take it forward. So,
Just one more question, if I'm allowed to. Uh, so, so you talked about the quantitative measurement of the neighborhood. So, do you think there could be some overlaps, if I may say so, with the qualitative uh, aspects also?
yeah,
The intangible aspects that each and every neighborhood or a city has. Do you think that two will run like parallel, or there could be some overlaps also between the quantitative and the qualitative?
Yes, yes. So when you run through these statistical models, right? So there is, you will get the all that correlations and which factors is affecting the other. So there is will be, so one factor might be affecting the other factor. There is an influential part also. So the dependence variable and the correlation and everything. So this is like, I run this whole data through a strata software where I did get the deviations and the standard errors about all the uh, measuring standards. And when we do the study also, when we do the analyze the society in a qualitative data, it become easier to do the mapping and testing it with the qualitative data. So that correlation is also measured, and data has been fed in. So the people will be saying, no, they are not satisfied this and that. So they will be saying, in the rooms are very hot. Yeah, and there will be 2-3 fans in the place. Now, when I do with the standard, checking with the standards and the area and everything, so there you will see the WWF ratio is less. So that is also a factor. Proper ventilation is not there. So, so those analysis has been taken into consideration, and then only the rules were set to put it into a quantitative data analysis. Yeah. So I have not gone into those details. So I think that is like creating the
Looking forward to Peter, ma'am.
yeah.
More to hear from you. Thank you.
Anyone else? Questions? I'm letting the silence sort of run for a while.
Can I
Yes,
break
please.
the silence? I mean, although I'm conscious that one must speak only if it improves on the silence. I don't know whether my breaking the silence is going to improve on the silence, but I think this is something that this is only an observation, and please don't regard it in any way as criticism, and because it might be really out of your current scope, Preeta, of addressing this. I do feel that, your theoretical framework and quite naturally, so is the PhD program, entrenched in very kind of Western social studies, anthropology, stroke art historical methods, and urban studies methods. Jan Gill and Jane Jacobs and Jan Gill and Lynch. These are, strong shoulders upon which we stand and look at ourselves. So the problem with doing that is that, of course, given that one is always running to catch up with what, the Western minds are telling us how the world operates, the problem is that how do you then address your own local issues? Where do we, as culturally very different, very diverse, very geographically different, socially different, economically different, how do those issues come in? Where do they come in? Do they have a chance even? It's a bit like, if we adopt, say, you want to build in concrete, because that's the global trend, 1950s, and you're very smart of Le Corbusier to say, don't leave the cities to the citizens. How arrogant as well, but that's none of my business. But when we choose to build in concrete, of course we will have problems of thermal comfort and suitability and how concrete ages, and so we've chosen concrete not as a material that is appropriate for our geographical location, but as something that puts us in the global map of contemporary architecture. Now, of course, I am making sweeping generalizations here, but on the basis of quite a lot of study on modernism as well. Now, and I love your example of this room is too hot. That could be such a fantastic title for a research paper or a paper. This room is too hot. Why is it too hot? You see, so I do think that methodologically it is obvious and quite natural to be inspired by the top minds of the world. But I think as a researcher, as somebody who's academically involved in studying and understanding our own context, it would be useful to see how you can take those theories forward and critique them and adapt them and make it more suitable for your current study. That is not easy, of course, but I would have thought some kind of some sort of local voices. I don't hear the local literature, notion of local engagement, local discourse. These are the things that I think should feature as your study is very much in this country. And also, sorry, I was just another thing with Jan Gill's compartmentalization of daily activity. Is all right for a modern compartmentalized culture. Whether at all this kind of mapping is suited for say even for women who would be cooking, looking after the family. Cooking is work, and would you say it's work? Would you say it's family? Would you say it's friends? Would you say? So there are blurring of boundaries that happen invariably, and of course that is one of the critiques of any mapping. I understand, but having said that, I would have liked to see some cultural threads sort of seeping into your methods of analysis, and yeah, I mean those are my thoughts, and as I say, you don't have to address them because they might be well out of scope.
No, it is not actually. It is not. It is there when I'm talking. So this is like, one of the chapter. This is basically this paper I developed from my data analysis chapter. So how I have analyzed the chapter and which method. So even, like you said, I'm not using any of the Western concepts or anything here. I'm just taking up this method of tracking, tracing, and counting of jungles, method of people and place, and just trying to see how you can measure it. So now when
Yeah, but I'm in the danger of getting misunderstood here. I don't have anything against Western art historical methods. Indeed, my own work is very much entrenched in Western art historical methods. Your PhD program is entrenched in Western art historical methods, art. So I'm not at all averse. One of the some of the finest, greatest minds come from Europe and America. So this is just a wishful thinking. Of course, it's not possible because we don't do our homework.
When I talk about Karimadam colony, I mean, I'm documenting that community. In that chapter, all these layers will be there. Where like how I think one of my SRC I did present about how this traditional community or the squatter settlements or the ordinary people's house used to be. And we know about Kerala housing, we call it as a nalaket, the courtyard houses and everything, which is not true. It's for ordinary people, the houses were often planned differently, where the kitchen and the bathroom was the extension and the additional thing. When it was used by converted into this today's context, it's all integrated into it. In these housing projects, if you see that bathroom and kitchen both are at the center of the house. So how that has, whether it has made any change in their lifestyle, or are they, how they got used to it. All these things were studied and documented, and it is like, like I said, one of the best projects. It has used low cost material, brick, exposed brickwork, pillar slabs, and community had to, per household has to pay just 20,000. That is also just to get a sense of commitment from the people. So yeah, those things are not there. Then the time constraint is also there, and I would not be able to. So once I maybe in the next proposition I will talk about how the community and the study was done, and maybe I can present that time those information. This is purely a data analysis part.
Music to my ears when someone says in the next proposition, I will present. Thanks, Preetha.
I'm in that, writing the full report stage. So, and kind of pressures we are having, that everything needs to be converted into research papers. So I think I will be writing more papers more frequently. So yeah.
So Parul has a comment and a question. So she thanks you for the presentation. The question is, are you also looking into capability-based approach in measuring affordable housing policies in India?
Housing policies as such, I'm not measuring. But what is the repercussion of the policies onto the housing scenario and the current housing policy? This comes under BSUP, Basic Services Scheme. So what has it impacted onto the people? So as such, policies will come only the theoretical framework, and what is the Pradhan Mantri Awas Yojana is the recent policy, and what has happened to that. So those things are only taken into consideration, and how that has been implemented in a local body or in a city. So I don't think I'll be addressing housing policy and. So capability-based approach is empowerment and employability and everything. So that is also a part of recent proposal of given housing and infrastructure status as it is. So that changes the whole dynamic. So yeah, that will become a part of it, but there is no comparison or the detailed analysis of it. What is the existing model? How it has been just measuring the livability and how it could be incorporated to the affordability is what all that I'm looking into. I hope I answered your question, Parul.
That was Parul Sharma.
Yeah.
But yeah, Parul, please type in if you have any further questions. She says yes, thank you. Professor Vasavra, may I invite you if you have any observations or feedback for Pritha?
Well, thank you. Thank you very much. I sort of have nothing more to say than what Professor Sachdev has said, because that was extremely relevant. And I do feel that this is just a part of your proposal or your study, because that is evident, when you present it. Because I was constantly thinking about your title, which said design and experience. And this is something, which I felt interested in when you picked up the example from Trivandrum. I'm quite conversant with Cotsford and Laurie Baker's work, and I have also seen these sites before they were really handled. And I'm also, in a sense, very much of the opinion that the, models for analysis have to be from within the context. And when you are actually aiming at your PhD, I think this should be one of your major concerns, rather than, relying on certain models, which are completely irrelevant for us. I mean, I'm of the firm belief. I will also tell you a little more, because Embark, which was helping us in Ahmedabad when we were doing this World Heritage dossier, involved Jan Gehl in developing a pilot project in this port city. Jan Gehl was my contemporary when I was studying at the Royal Academy of Fine Arts. And this is something, which I rediscovered when the firm came on board. They sent one of their representatives here to study. And you will be surprised that they never talked about their theories when they were working with us here. In fact, working with us, we were constantly trying to discover our own models for analysis. And this is what they did with our help. So that is one. And as Professor Sachdev was mentioning, there are really very sensitive Western scholars who have vehemently said that what they are talking about, analytical possibilities of Western architecture or Western situations, they are extremely conscious that they are not universally applicable. And even, when I was studying, I think the emphasis has always been to pick up study areas in our own country, in our own culture, and take help from the scholars from there in order to develop, our analytical models for the situation that we pick up. So this is something, which I think any institute has to really make as a kind of a mandatory effort, because we lack into this kind of material. And that is why it is very convenient for us to rely on the Western models. So if you are really trying to contribute something through your PhD in a place like Kerala, which is extremely strong in terms of its cultural, traditions, I feel it would be a great contribution if you try to develop our own models.
Yeah.
And I think I would only say this, but I must say that as far as design and experience was concerned, I think you could have really made your beginning there. Because I think unless you know what you want to study, how can you straight away start talking about models, for analysis. Unless you have material, unless you have basis to analyze something, how can you straight away start talking about the models for analysis? So it would have been really good, to really know what kind of housing you were actually present and studying. So this is something, which I also feel that as an approach, I think if you want to study a situation which is a kind of built environment, I think you should really present that first, because we don't know what that it is. And I must also tell you, I have been involved with Cotswold, since almost, mid 2000. They have been also inviting me, because our interests, somehow were common. And Laurie Baker also passed away, in those years. And, the kind of work that Cotswold is now doing using the construction techniques, that was promoted by Laurie Baker. I mean, they have really gone into different areas, you see, just using construction techniques. For example, I could really not imagine 3-floor structures, you see, using the same kind of techniques, you see. So I'm really wondering whether, discussing those things would have really resulted into different kind of direction of these projects. So I would only, say this, that first is, if you're presenting a kind of, situation, I think you should start with that, and then, try to work out the model from within the context, and, ultimately try to bring in the users, you see, when you're talking about a subject, of housing, which is so important. So I would only say this.
Yeah, thank you, sir. Yeah.
Thank you.
Thank you, sir. I fully agree. I'm also associated with Cotswold, and with their works and everything. I've taken our own students from the second year to Kerala, and then they did a workshop with Cotswold, and they are doing research the brick and the export brick. Now they're working with the mud and mud techniques and the bamboo structures, the 3-story and the 5-story buildings. They're building with just purely with bamboo, and then they're using this mud. So Laurie Baker never promoted actually the brick or the exposed brick thing. He wanted to have built with mud stabilizing blocks, but then those were considered as a kacha material, so people were not getting bank loans. So that's how they moved to exposed brickwork and things like that. So yes, that is the one of the reason, because why I took these 2 projects was because these are considered to be one of the best projects, one of the best work, and it is done by Cotswold, which is purely you are into the construction and purely for the community and non-profit group, and the work is commendable. So I just wanted to study this.
No, I think I'm not disputing that at all, because I think I've seen most of their work.
Yeah.
I have seen, because they have taken me to see all their works all along Kerala. And, as far as the work of Laurie Baker, which actually dealt with the local material, is something, which is phenomenal. One of our colleagues, have written also a book, Gautam Bhatia, you might have known. And even when he was surveying all this, we had a chance to somehow constantly discuss this. So this is something, which is undeniable. I mean, you should also see some of his houses, the private houses that he has done. And, he's sort of, he's concerned with local culture and local people, you see, because being an outsider, he was constantly very conscious of this. And how he selected certain patterns, which were so dear to him, and which many times would appear, quite a craze, but he still followed that. You see, for example, he was extremely fond of mangoes, And you will be surprised if you see some of his houses which he has done. The plan is in the shape of a mango. Now how beautifully, he has really worked out his construction for this kind of a house. You should, I mean, if you get a chance, you should go and see these houses, because he did house for a local, lady who was very prominent with NGO there. And I know that lady because she was connected with Seva. She took me to see her house, and she said she just knew about Laurie Baker and she wanted to have a house designed by him because she loved the kind of construction that he did out of local material and with local people. So she said, I have only 1 lakh rupees. And if you can build a house for me, I'll be very happy. And Laurie Baker accepted this. And she took me to see this house. Now, if you see that house, you will be really thrilled, because I think what he created for her was a fantastic environment, where there were no rooms, but everywhere there was privacy. So he was a very sensitive person, and he himself in his work never thought of bringing anything, from West. Now, for you, that could be the greatest lesson, that here was a foreigner, a British engineer trying to work in India, but he was so conscious of Indian culture that he never wanted to use whatever he got from West here because he wanted to do something which was relevant for the culture. Now, can't we adopt this as a big lesson for our studies,
Yes.
So this is something, which I'm talking about,
Yes, sir.
And in the contrast, he did work for the former chairman of HUDCO, Suresh. So he also took me to see his house, which was in a sense a same kind of a pattern in plan of a mango, but it was a fantastic, huge house, So at 2 scales, you see this man working, but the technique of construction was such that he could really extend, from the minimum to the maximum. So, I mean, this is something which, if you talk of Laurie Baker, is a great lesson for us, that here is somebody from West trying to tell us to look at our culture and work accordingly with a material which was developed locally, and he only utilized to put the material together in a construction which was also optimizing the material. So if you see Cotswold campus, if you see the library that he has built, everywhere you find some kind of a commonness, of concept, which was based on using the material and construction techniques to suit that particular kind of scales, So this is something, which as architects, I think we have to really bring out. To me, this is design and the experience. I've also seen his community building, which he has done for absolutely, common people in the villages. So everywhere you see this as a kind of constant thread, where his consistent approach was to be local, serve for local, and use local. So this is something, which I would consider as a great opportunity for you. And I think you really get out of this. References, really. If you really want to make your PhD contribution,
Sure. I'll
Thank you.
Thank you, sir. Thank you, sir.
Thank you so much, Professor Vasavra. And so, Pritha, lots of
Yeah,
things to
I
think
knew
about.
this were the gaps that was not addressed in this paper. Yeah, but I will be taking into consideration. Yeah. Thank you, sir.
I'll
Thank you.
repeat it again, but this is all work in progress. So it's,
Yeah,
and we are
but
very
the
grateful that you have shared your work.
direction is very important. I think the kind
Yes,
of
yes,
direction you
perfect.
set up is very important. Otherwise, you simply stray,
It's true, sir. You need those checks, especially when you are doing your PhD, and then what is
Yeah.
important, what is relevant, and how to put everything together. It becomes very. Actually, when you're doing it, you don't realize, but when you hear.
And I have always realized that you are your best guide.
Yeah.
I think you should forget everything else.
Yeah.
But we also need the guidance of others.
Guidance,
Hence
yeah,
this
yeah.
platform.
Well,
Thank you so much, though.
thank you. Thank you so much. Pleasure.
No, I think that's a very good advice, because what this platform really encourages all of us to hear our own voice, which gets covered and clouded by all the noise that is around. So it is in that spirit that all this observation pointers ought to be taken, because somewhere down in your gut you must also feel that. Otherwise, it's not relevant. You see what I mean? So that's why Professor Savras said this, that in the end, it has to come from the gut, and we are merely facilitators of that gut voice, which will make all of our work more relevant to the land we are working on. So that's what the core value is. So I think that's good.
That's a good, yeah.
Good note.
Yes, I think a good note to probably, if are there any other questions? I don't want to abruptly close off anyone else who may have also had some questions develop or observations develop in the meantime. All right. So with that, thank you so much, Preetha, Professor Vasavra, Vibhuti.
Thank you.
and
Thank you.
entire
Such a
team.
pleasure.
Wonderful. Thank you so much.
Such a pleasure.
We'll have another proposition. I think in 2 weeks is a holiday. It's Good Friday, but the Friday after that, I think we have a person from the School of Design, Preetham Lenka. And back with that. All right. Thank you.
Great. Thank you.
Thank you.
Bye.
Thank you.